What's poppin'? My name is Richie, and today I have 5 amazing things which you can build with the newest addition to Fortnite Creative, which is the single remote manager. You can build cool stuff like superhero abilities, car keylocks, and so much more. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. Alright, and here we are. These are the 5 things that I'm going to show you how to build. But first of all, let's give a quick run on how this device works. It's not too hard, but it's still very important. And this device needs 2 components. The one is the remote manager over here, which basically has all the channels in there. Very basic stuff, super easy. And then we also have in the weapons category the single remote devices in itself, where you can actually click on the device. So if you put it out, you can see I can right click and left click. These are basically the primary and secondary actions. To make these devices work together, you have to put one of these devices, there are 4 of them in total, A, B, C, and D. You have to put one of them actually into the device. So you can drag it out and put it in there. And now they're linked, and now you can take out the other one, and now you can basically do whatever you want. Super simple stuff, but I think it's very important that you can actually put the devices in there so you can link them together. Very important. So that was basically all you have to know about these 2 devices. Super simple. But now we come to the first thing that you can build with this. And obviously this is a very easy one. We're going to go a little bit more advanced with the other ones. But this is just for beginners, just to start out. A super simple thing which you can do is you can unlock a door and open it and close it with this device without ever touching the door. So what you have to do here is you need a key lock or lock device actually. You can also find that same thing in the devices category, and then you type in lock, and here it is. In this device, you have to put in 2 channels for opening and closing the door. Obviously, very simple, opening when channel 3 and closing when channel 4. In this device, you have to do the same thing, channel 3 for the primary action and channel 4 for the secondary action. Make sure that if you want to have it as quick as possible, that you also set the cooldown to 1 second. The cooldown is the thing where if you click the device, you can see that there's a little 1 showing how long you can reactivate it after clicking once. So once you're done with that, you have to obviously choose which of these 4 signal remote controllers you want to use and have to put them obviously in there. Then you have to place somewhere in your map. So I just place them in an item spawner, and then if we start the game, you can see that we get greeted with the controller, and now we can click, open the door, and we have a 4-second cooldown, and now we can also close the door. Super simple. We cannot go here and open it or close it. Super simple, but very efficient, and I think this is a very good starting point for the controller. Let's come to number 2, and this one is a pretty cool one and pretty useful for a lot of cases where you have to do timed kind of stopping and timed kind of stuff. We can actually toggle, pause, play the music sequencer with this new device. And we can even make it stop, we can make it run whenever we want. It is super easy, super efficient to build. You do need a little bit of creative knowledge for the music sequencer, but other than that, the remote controller is super easy to set up. So starting with the music sequencer first, we go in here, and the important thing is that we have activation type to toggle, pulse, play, and pause. And this will allow us to actually pause and play the whole thing, and that will start from the beginning and start from the end. Then also activate when paused, so that we'll make sure that we can see the music sequence as well. And the other things are basically unimportant. You can do whatever you want in here. So I have it from game start, so we can start from the beginning and we don't have to press any extra buttons. And then also make sure that you have the stop button set up for a channel, and then the resume button. Do not set up the start button, because that will basically reset the whole music sequencer. So if you want to stop and start, we want to have these 2 channels. Okay, so now we can see that our music sequence is running, and with our buttons in our thing, we can actually stop it and make sure that it's only moving forward when we actually press the button. So now we want to continue it, and it starts moving again. So I think this is pretty useful for especially timed kind of objectives. Anything where you want players to have like different timings for different types of things. So for this next one, we have something where you can lock your car and make sure that only the person that has the key, which in our case is the controller, can drive and stop and park the car. So you can see we're standing in front of a car, and we cannot enter the car, we cannot go into the car, and basically it's locked. Now if we get up the key and now we press our starting button, our unlocking car, we can go into the car, we can drive the car, and we're cool. And now the last thing we have to do is obviously just drive the car back, and we can park it in the same position it was before, where our parking slot is, and we can go here, and now we can drive it, but we can also press here, and now it's locked and nobody can go into it again. Super cool thing to do, especially in like open world maps where you maybe have different cars, different people that use cars, so you can have your own car. Really cool to use. So also building this is fairly simple. It is not as simple as the other 2 ones which I just showed you, but it's still super simple. Obviously we need the remote manager and a controller. Same thing, link them up, nothing new here. The other thing which we now need is the cars. So for the car part, we actually need obviously a car spawner, so you can use whatever car you want. It doesn't have to be any specific car. And we also need a barrier device. Starting with the car spawner first, in here you basically don't have to do anything special. Make sure that you have the assigned driver when receiving from to a channel which is also linked to your single remote controller. So you can see here on primary I have channel 1. So for the barrier device, basically the one thing which is very important is that it obviously fits the size of the car. And we also need to make sure that it's box hollow, otherwise the car will get crushed, and we obviously don't want that. So other things which are important is that we have enable on channel 2 and disable on channel 1, or whatever channel you want to use. The important thing is that if we step into the car, the barrier gets disabled, and if we press the lock button, the barrier gets enabled. So basically you have to reverse the roles on these. And that is basically all you have to do. Now start the game and you're good to go. Super simple, super easy to set up. Alright, so coming up to number 4, and this one is a pretty cool one where you can switch out your loadout while pressing the button. So you can see here, we can quickly show this. You can see I have a pump shotgun right now in my hand. And if I press here, I get a new gun. And if I press again, I get another new gun. And if we circle again, I get the pump back. So it's a pretty cool thing. It's a little bit more advanced, but still very easy to build. Okay, so let me quickly explain you guys the theory behind this. So we have obviously again the remote single controller and the remote single manager. You have to link them up as normal, and then we have to give it a primary button. We don't need a single secondary button, but you can have it if you want to go a little bit more advanced here as well. So we just need one click, and with this one click we're gonna make sure that we get our first item. In this case we're gonna get a class which has the pump shotgun. The class you can get by using a class selector, and in the class selector you have to make sure that you have the right class for the right class inventory settings, or whatever it's called. One very important thing is that we have a change player to class when receiving from. Very important though is that this channel is not the same channel as in our click device in the remote controller. And why is that? Because we need to circle around, and we cannot circle with just one button. We need a trigger device for that, and in the trigger devices you basically have to do the same thing for all of the items that you want to circle through. Once the first item that you're ever going to get needs to be enabled, so this trigger needs to be enabled from start, then you want to have a trigger when receiving from, that is our button. So we're going to activate this little trigger with our button, and this trigger then going to disable itself. So make sure that we cannot press it again and get the same gun again. Then we also want to make sure that we send another signal, which then obviously gives us the gun. So from now on, we press the button, and this trigger gets activated. This trigger activates the selector, and we're gonna get the gun from here. From now on, this selector is disabled, and we move on to the next item over here. This item then gets the same thing triggered by our little trigger over here. But the important thing here is that this one is disabled from game start, and only gets enabled if we have already pressed this one over here, which then this one activates this one, and then the circle continues while we loop around, and the last one then activates or reactivates the first one. And this is basically how this works. It is a little bit more complicated and definitely not something a beginner would do from the start. And the cool thing about this is, as you already see, we only have one channel used, so you can even have a second channel where you can have like maybe different guns or different classes. So you can really go full out here, and I quickly want to show you again how this works in full time. So now that you have a basic understanding on how I built this, you can see here on the triggers I left them all on, so you can see what is going to happen. So if we press here, we get the gun, this one gets activated, we get here, and now you can see this one is activated. If we press again, this one gets deactivated, we get the gun, and all over again, and here we go. Super easy if you figure it out, but a little bit harder to get in the first place. Okay, so and the last one is something where you can create superhero abilities and stuff like that, super jumps and different direction movements, teleports, and with a lot of different channels at once. So how you can do this is by, I quickly show you guys how this looks. So if we go in here, you can see none of these is activated, and obviously we kind of need these for super jumps. And if I now press the button, you can see that I fly just from this one, and all the others are still deactivated. So if I go here, nothing happens, but if I press, I get jumped in the air. Let me quickly guys show you how this works and how you can set up multiple of these little devices to get basically the same output for one and deactivate and activate them all at the same time. Okay, so as you can see, we need a little bit more here, but same thing again, we need the controller, we only need one of them, and in this case we need 4. But the number of how many of these managers you need is dependent on how many jump boosts or how many abilities you want to put into your map. So in my case, I only used 4 here just for this little grid. But for each of them we have 4. and in here this time we have them all enabled from game start to off. The reason why that is because we don't want anything to actually start shooting before we not enter the zone of the actual event. So how does the theory work is we get this little item over here, so I'll quickly get myself one for references. So I quickly show you in theory how this works. So if we go in here, you can see that we enter a mutator zone. This mutator zone then activates and says, this player is inside of the zone and now we can use the boost jump in this area. We don't have to activate all of these other keys. We just have to activate this one, which is linked to this little remote controller. So now if we press the button, we can jump up and we are good to go. The cool thing about this is that all these other events do not get activated, so we don't boost up any other players which are not in our specific area. You can even link this up to different classes and channels, but that is obviously a whole different scenario. And I know this is a little bit complicated and something that probably you will not build if you're just started out with creative. But if you're a little bit experienced, you know what I'm talking about. What I did here basically for each of the classes is that as soon as I enter this mutator zone, you can see there are 4 mutator zones here. And you can see that if I enter or leave the mutator zone, I send signals. These signals then are going to be here and activating and disabling this device. So we're not sending any channels to from our remote controller. We're actually sending signals to activate this little controller. And it's pretty easy. Basically, all you have to do is just make sure if you enter, then you enable, and if you leave, then you disable. And we also want to have the primary action to boost the vent up. So you can see here activate, which means boosting the vent, gives us channel 10, which is clicking the right mouse click. And that is basically all you have to do. Now you have to copy and paste this a bunch of times. Make sure that you use different channels. You cannot use the same channels, even if they're deactivated, they will somehow work. So just use different channels, do the same thing over and over again, make sure all of these are disabled, make sure all of the vents are disabled, and then you are easy to go. Obviously, last but not least, you obviously have to disable them so you don't see them in game. So I did it just for the purpose of you guys showing how this works. And now you can go in here and so you can see that we activated, and now we can super jump. We can go into the next one and we can super jump again. And it works super fine. It is very cool to use and it's very specific, but obviously a little bit harder to build, and I don't advise you to build this if you just started out with creative, because it can basically ruin your whole day of creative. And yeah. And also, one thing which I almost forgot is that you also still have a channel left for a second down. So you can, for example, if you want to give your player a speed boost, so quick mini tutorial on the side, you can go into like the power-ups category, and then you can get the grid power-up, the damage amplifier, or any of the other ones. For example, let's take this one. So this one over here, and then you can go pick up when receiving from. You put a different channel in here, and then you put the same channel on all of these other devices, and you basically have 2 abilities in just one device, which is, I think, pretty cool. So yeah, that's been it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you could learn something today, and don't forget to use code RichieTools in the item shop, and I'll do all that other YouTube stuff. And I'll see you guys back in the next one. Bye.